Hey, Tattooed. I used to think that crawler humanoids were just creepypasta fiction or beliefs held by ignorant people. That was until January 2022, during the pandemic. I actually saw one in Mexico City around 8:30 p.m. in a highly urbanized area in the city, but close to an ecological reserve. Fortunately, I wasn't alone when I saw the thing, because otherwise, I might have thought it was just a hallucination. I'm a biologist, and I was with my wife and my brother, who is also a biologist with a PhD, and my mom. It was our usual nighttime walk along our usual route, and I'd never seen anything like that before, and unfortunately, I haven't seen anything like it since. It was my wife who first saw it about 30 meters away from us, illuminated only by the moonlight. She pointed out initially, we thought it was a dog, but upon closer inspection, it kind of looked like a person who was bald, pale, and crawling on the ground at a 180 degrees angle. Now, a human would naturally lift their pelvis to move that way, but this thing didn't. It really looked like Gollum, or maybe the creatures from that movie, The Descent. I thought it could be a homeless person, although it's rare to see such individuals there. I didn't feel any fear, but more curiosity. I wanted to get closer and see what it was, but my companion stopped me. We hurried and walked silently to reach a more populated area. In about 5 minutes, we were on a venda in Searches Sur, and we relaxed a bit. We talked amongst ourselves about what that thing could have been, but we never reached an explanation. Now, evidently, people in the scientific community, they don't believe us. Or they just have a hypothesis of a bald, albino homeless person with severe mental issues, but whatever that thing was, it definitely wasn't human. The area is volcanic with caves, and the vegetation is a weird scrub. Nearby are the Institutes of Biology, Ecology, and Biomedical Research. The Olympic Stadium is also close by. The entire area is monitored by surveillance cameras, so that humanoid beings have surely been captured on video by security, but for some reason, nothing has been officially reported. For decades now, the area lacked lighting and was ideal for stargazing without light pollution. Now, coincidentally, after our sighting, the area was fully illuminated, and the vegetation was trimmed. Security was increased, with the guards urging all the visitors to leave due to reports of feral dogs. To finish, an interesting fact. After seeing that pale humanoid, we didn't talk about the incident again, almost like we had forgotten it. It wasn't until 6 months later when my brother showed us a video about the iceberg of Yunnan, which has since been deleted from YouTube and TikTok, that several people reported similar pale humanoids in the same area. What was surprising was that all of us who were involved had totally forgotten about it. From that moment, I've been investigating. Various cultures in the Americas have legends and folklore about creatures that resemble the pale humanoid. Here in Mexico, they're called Nuhalas, or Chinecas, depending on the region of the country. I've since returned to the same place after dark, and always in winter. It's been said that these things prefer the cold and are nocturnal, but I've not seen it again since. I kind of hope to encounter that thing again, and this time I will approach it to find out what it is, as it's haunted my thoughts ever since. Whatever it is, that thing shouldn't exist. Signed, Nick. Dear Tattooed Biker, my mom's family is from the western North Carolina area, going back about 4 generations, if not more, depending on the line of grandparents you follow. My mom is 93 now, but still loves to tell stories about the primitive way that she grew up, and I love to listen. She and my grandparents and her brothers and sisters grew up in the woods of Wilkes County, with no running water or electricity. They lived in a primitive house with spaces between the plank walls where snow would blow in during the winter. Life was incredibly hard, full of death, disease, tragedy, horror, and loss, but there was also a lot of good. One story that Mom tells is about the orb lights that would hang out at the tree line. My grandpa called them jack-o'-lanterns. They were orbs of light that floated around, and you couldn't get near them or catch them. Keep in mind that no one had a car in the woods where they lived, and they were a good ways from the nearest road. I went back to the old home place in 2019, and I guesstimate it's about a half-mile from the nearest road. Another story that Mom tells is about when she and some of her siblings were working in the field with my grandparents when they were growing up. They did a lot of field work because without that, there literally was no food. A few times, they had nearly starved. Anyways, they were out in the field and they heard a noise, like something falling through the air, and headed their way. They looked around and suddenly, something hit the ground near them with a tremendous force. They could actually feel the shock wave from it in the air, and they felt it hit the ground, only there was nothing there when they looked. There's also lots of stories about the sounds in the woods, which I think were bobcats, the local witch that could stop nosebleeds, and the ghost dog in the kitchen that was witnessed by Mom and her younger sister. I've heard the same story from both of them my whole life. And my uncle's cow that was drained of blood and left lying there in the pasture. There were also many stories about the Wampus cat and the little people that roam the mountains. Thanks for reading. Signed, Katrina. Dear Tattooed Biker, this may sound weird, but I did have a strange experience at the new Camaldi Hermitage. It's a working monastery, south of Big Sur, California. Now this is my first time telling this, and it may sound insane, but so be it. I was doing a silent retreat there, and went outside very late at night. That's when I saw a very tall, humanoid figure that was 7 to 8 feet tall. It had very long limbs, was very thin, and was wearing a bodysuit of some kind of shiny material. It was running on a hill, moving very fluid and very fast. I ran the whole 20 feet back to my room, which had a back door and a window overlooking a gulch, with only enough room for a very narrow deer path. I was just in time to see the same entity move into the field of vision in the far window. It was almost like a rack focus in a film as I sprinted across the room to lock the door. The entity suddenly disappeared, and I never saw it again. But the distance that it would have had to cover to make it behind the building was far too fast for any human to have done. Now, I'm a rationalist. The retreat was to get away from the tech world that I live in, so I've always just chalked it up to some kind of military experiment. Well, I give this story to you now. You can decide what to do with it. Signed, Michael. Dear Biker, I came across your channel after searching for a creature that I saw back in the spring of 2016 in southeast Louisiana near Franklinton. My son, 12 years old at the time, and I were traveling on back highways at about 10 p.m. We started going around this curve to the right, and another car was coming in the opposite direction, so I had just dimmed my headlights. And that's the moment that I saw it. This thing was around 8 feet tall, standing on the right side of the road. It was looking at the other car, and as it passed, it turned to look our way and crouched down into a sprinter's starting stance. Its hair or fur was dirty white that covered most of the body. It was human-like in the upper torso, but I'm not too sure about the bottom half. The head was very wolf-like and large, with a dirty white mane that was thick running down its back. Now, the entire encounter only lasted about 10 seconds, and I only focused on the top. It was, at the waist, quite thin, and defined with a human-like musculature. It had its ears back like a cat would. Its eyes were bright yellow, and its mouth was wide open and full of sharp teeth with long canines. My son claims that it had inverted knees like a dog. I referred to it as a were-dog at the time. The fur color and other attributes matched the description of the Rougarou, which I was familiar with from the tales told to me by my grandfather. Now, we saw this thing less than 10 miles as the crow flies from our home, and that's a bit disconcerting. There was a sighting of a similar, upright creature a few years ago, and about 3 miles from where we had our encounter. Thanks for reading. Signed, Henry. Dear Biker, this happened exactly 3 days after Halloween in 2024. I live in southwest Georgia, and my home backs up to a large forest. It was around 2 a.m. and I couldn't sleep, so I went back on my porch to read, smoke, and have some tea. I was only out there for maybe 30 minutes when suddenly I heard what sounded like something heavy falling or jumping from a tree before hitting the forest floor violently. At first, I thought maybe a tree had fallen, until right where I heard the noise come from, I immediately began hearing what sounded like something walking around on all fours. Something large. Now, first I assumed maybe a bear. There's a fence directly in front of me, so I know I can dart inside before it can reach me. So I sat there, curiously hopeful to see this bear, my eyes set diligently on the dark forest. And then, for about a split second, illuminated by my porch light, I can see a shadowy figure of whatever it is. It wasn't furry, nor cute, nor was it a bear. It was all black, huge, limber, and humanoid, and crawling around on all fours, scurrying even, ducking and diving behind the trees, maybe 15 feet in front of me, out in the darkness. And that's when the laughter began. Now, the best way to describe this laugh was a stereotypical witch with some kind of uncanny, animalistic distortion. It was cackling so loudly, psychotically, maniacally, and mockingly. I thought for sure my neighbors would be rushing outside at any moment. I was absolutely frozen in fear. I couldn't move. I didn't even want to move. I thought if I did, then whatever it was would surely give chase. So I just sat there, frozen, staring back blankly at the forest that mocked me. This laughing and staring match went on for a good 3 minutes. Finally, I found the courage to look down long enough to grab my phone and record a video with a flashlight. The moment that the flashlight hit the trees, the laughter stopped, of course, but the scurrying sound continued. Finally, I just yelled out, "Screw this," and I dashed inside. A week later, I was awake, late yet again, this time in my bedroom, and I heard what sounded like human footsteps running around on my roof in circles. It lasted maybe 5 minutes. That was the last anything has happened, though. Thanks for reading. Signed, Anonymous. Hey TB, about 4 years ago, I lived in an old house outside of the city limits in Birmingham. Wild hogs are considered a nuisance in this part of the country, and thus are year-round game. Now, the land wasn't mine, but it was a legal hunting ground, so my landlord gave me and my friends explicit permission to take care of any hogs that we came across. So, a lot of the time, especially during the winter when this encounter took place, I was posted up on my back porch with a cigar and a gun, either by myself or with company. Now, this land wasn't very clear. In fact, we only had about 20 feet from the porch to the tree line, and then it would go down a hill and the brush would get much thicker. So our hunting was just being quiet and looking out for the beady eyes of hogs when we heard the rustling. So, all that being said, one night during my porch sitting, I hear some rustling. I started scanning the woods for this hog and eventually did come across a set of white, beady eyes. They weren't a hog's eyes, though, because these were eye level with me. As my eyes continued to adjust, the rest of the creature started coming into view. It was tall, thin, and had long, spindly arms and legs. Its entire body was completely black. I couldn't make out any facial features besides the eyes, but what I could make out was that this thing was actually a good ways down the hill. So the fact that it was still eye level with me meant that it was likely around 10 feet tall. It started up the hill, coming towards me, and I had this feeling in my gut that my .45 caliber bullets probably weren't going to do much here. So I slowly collected my things and backed into the house. This thing didn't make any sound as it moved, other than the slight crunch of leaves as it climbed the hill. It somewhat stopped at the tree line and then turned and walked along the edge of it. It bobbed and lurched a bit as it walked, kind of how some large birds bob their heads when they move. That was the most terrifying thing that I'd seen in a long while, and as the title says, this wasn't the only encounter. My hunting buddies all saw it several times, walking through the trees a bit away from the house. Sometimes it would turn to look back at us. My roommate, who moved in later that same year, once walked outside and saw it right up against the porch, looking down at her. It never tried to attack anyone or even acted aggressively. So we eventually stopped being as scared, although still very cautious, and we started calling him Big Boy. Thanks. Signed, Philip. Hey Biker, a while back I sent you my story about the creature we called Big Boy. I finally spoke to my old roommate who had seen it up close. She said it was more eerie than downright scary. It just looked at her like it was curious, tilting its head to the side like a dog when you're holding something at once. My hunting buddies and I all saw it from 30 to 50 feet away, but she ended up being much closer to it than all of us. She confirmed that it had no features other than eyes, but it had sunken-in spaces on the face where the features should be. I understand her not taking a photo. I wouldn't take a photo of a bear if it was 10 feet from me, let alone this thing. Thanks. Signed, Philip. And there it is. All the true reports of strange encounters and sightings that I have for you tonight. So what'd you think about these? As always, I'm anxious to read your thoughts and theories down in the comments below, but please, keep it respectful to the witnesses. And if you have an unexplained encounter that you'd like to share, just send it to the email address in the description and, well, your story may just wind up in a future video. Anyways, thanks so much for taking this weird ride with me tonight. I really appreciate you. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and well, I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker out.